And we've come quite a long ways. If you're just tuning in for the first time, there are two companion videos that you should watch before this. We are learning how to scrape Amazon, use Beautiful Soup, and output the results to a Pandas data frame, and then maybe a comma separated value CSV file. So what have we done so far? We figured out how to create a list of pages. We figured out how to trick Amazon using a very, very complex header object and pass that along to the requests library and use Beautiful Soup to parse the HTML text. So I have three functions here. I've also challenged you to write your own functions. We've went over how to use the Chrome DevTools inspector to find our divs or spans with different class names, so on and so forth. So what do we need to do now? So we have 10 divs per page, right? We have little helper functions. We can get the stars, we can get the review body, we can get the review date. Now, if you're new to programming, you might be inclined to just do this all in one function. And I would implore you to not do it all in one function, because what happens, who is texting me? Jeez. What happens is sometimes you will get to a point where you put too much logic in a function and you'll start having exceptions, and you need to handle those exceptions very, very granularly. So if you don't have a function that just deals with the find method on one particular object, handling the exceptions and making sure your code doesn't break becomes much more complicated and error prone. So writing small functions that do one thing, that give you the ability to handle very specific errors, is good programming practice. And if you're not doing it now, I just highly suggest that you do it now. It's something I didn't like doing at first many years ago when I learned how to code. And now looking back on it, that was just stupid, lazy, and obnoxious of me. So little modular functions. Now, how do we organize this stuff? So we have ways to get the individual data points, but we need to organize it. And as you might have guessed, I'm going to write a function that calls each of these functions individually. So it's like an orchestrator function. So let's just write that. Let's say define get review components. And what is it going to take? Well, it's going to take a review soup object. And how are we going to handle this? So what I'm planning on passing into it is essentially one of these 10 reviews. So it's a review soup object, and let's just stay consistent. Let's just call it a review soup object. So what I want to return is a dictionary. I want to return a dictionary, and with newer Python, you could actually use type hints or actually show what's being returned. Like in this case, I'm just returning a string. In this other case, I think I'm always returning a string. Maybe I attempted to return an integer for one of these, but for now I'm just returning a string. And this is not going to be enforced by Python. It's really just there to help the person who's reading the code. Like, oh, it gets stars, it returns a string. Okay, cool. So yeah, it just helps for code readability. You could also say, like, what is soup object? It's a beautiful soup object. I don't know if that's the right way to do it, but for people who might be reading your code or others down the line, at least it's like, oh yeah, soup, yeah, beautiful soup. Okay, so it just helps you better understand what's going on. And we could put it here too. If you want to learn more about that, you can search for MyPy, Python type hints. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you can learn about typing in Python. And a lot of people like it too. I like it. So we're going to create a function to orchestrate everything. It's going to return a dictionary. So I'm going to say return a dictionary. And I'm going to have keys. I'm going to say stars. I'm going to return stars. I'm going to return the body. And I'm going to return the date. And if you parsed out more things, you could return however many keys in the dictionary that you want. So what am I going to do here? I'm going to return get stars. And I'm going to pass in my soup object, and you'll see how it all works momentarily. And for the body, I'm going to say get review body. And look, I'm already like, I should call this get review stars, right? Let's just be be exact. Get review stars, get review body, get review date. Be precise, use good variable names, right? And what else do we need? Get review date, hit tab to autocomplete that. Soup object, some of you are probably already upset with me that I forgot to pass in the soup objects. This is kind of like functional style code, right? Like I have a function, I'm passing in an argument, and this argument gets passed into these other functions, and it does some work on it. This is kind of a nice style of programming sometimes. So in order to try this out, let's just try it on one of my review objects. So I'll pick the fifth one. And cool, it seems to work. So now I have this dictionary with stars, body, and date. Let's see if it works for that one. Yeah, okay, great. So the end game now is Pandas. It's easy to make a data frame from a list of dictionaries. So that's a pattern I like, list of dictionaries pattern. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say my results, my records, are going to be equal to a list comprehension. I'm going to say get review components of the review for review in reviews. So don't panic if that's weird looking. What do we have here? If you've never seen a list comprehension, it's basically a loop. It's like saying for review in reviews, and I'm writing typos, this is not going to work. Records.append get review components rev, right? And this is like, imagine if I had a list called records. So in a roundabout way, this is shorthand for code that might look like this. So now I have a list of dictionaries called records. And what I can say is my data frame is equal to PD data frame from records, and I'm just going to pass in the records list of dictionaries. And this is a pattern I go back to all the time. If I could just get my data into a list of dictionaries, I can feed it into Pandas, and I'm good to go. So let's see what happens here. Great. So Pandas automatically infers the column names from the keys in the dictionary. And this is great now, right? So, okay, what do we have to do now? So obviously I could save it, right? I could say df to CSV, Amazon reviews.csv. I'll just leave the defaults. And now, if I look at the first 5 rows of Amazon reviews.csv, yeah, seems to work, right? So ls, I've got my file there. It worked just fine. So this is kind of a nice pattern. Individual helper functions, they get orchestrated by something that calls them individually. Now, you know, I'm not returning anything, right? So maybe I want to return something like if I hit an exception, no date. Or if I hit an exception, you know, no body. If I hit an exception, what is this one? No stars. Return no stars. And I forgot the return keyword here. So at least my functions are now true to the expected return value. Even if I hit an exception, it's just going to return a data type which is consistent with the return value I'm specifying, which is nice. Again, error handling is something you have to imagine and develop for yourself. There's no right way to do it, but just try to be consistent. So great. Now we have this thing. We only did it for the first URL. So how would I actually do this for multiple URLs? Well, I'll give you one idea, right? So if we go down to the bottom, so let me just say, for you in URLs, I could say, here's my response, right? I'll say request.get you. I'll print you too, just so we see it. We'll just print you. And then I need to actually get my beautiful soup object. So I'll say my soup is equal to beautiful soup of response.text. And then I need to grab the reviews from the soup object, if you recall. So I'll say the reviews. And this is where you probably want to start migrating things into a script like the one provided in the gist. And now I'm basically back to this step. So I'll say, well, here are my records. I'm going to get review components, rev for rev in reviews. And maybe what I'll do is, since I have to do this in kind of a, I need like another loop, right? Because I'm doing this for each URL. I'll say like all reviews is equal to a list. And maybe I'll say all reviews dot extend records. Extend is like combine two lists in Python, sort of. So as you know in Python, let's just say I have 1, 2, 3. I can append 5. Let me just call this like xxx equals 1, 2, 3. And I can append 5. And then if I look at it, 1, 2, 3, 5. On the other hand, if I want to like append a list to a list, I could say extend 4, 5, 6. And so that's what I'm doing here. It's kind of like extend in Python is like appending a list to a list in a way. So, okay, so we're iterating over URLs. We use requests. Now, what problem? So I need to pass in my headers or else Amazon's going to give me a big FU. So I get my response. I create my soup object. I find all the reviews. I convert my reviews to a nice list of dictionaries using my helper functions and my orchestrator function there. And then I update all reviews to include that list of reviews. And then I'll say, sometimes I call like the final thing I'm going to use, I call it out. And I'll say PD Dataframe from records. And I'll just pass in all reviews. Whoops. And let's take a look at it. URLs is not defined. Good first step. Pages. Should have pages. Okay. Bada bing, bada boom. For you and pages. Maybe I should call it P. Whatever. Okay. Hopefully it works. Yeah, it seems to have worked. How could we gut check that? Out.shape 30 by 3, right? Maybe we could look at out.body unique, out.date and unique, 29. Okay, so 29 unique dates. That's good. It means it didn't repeat itself over and over again. And let's actually just take a look at it real quick. Out.body. Yeah, whatever. All right. So, and now, of course, you can save that. One thing I like to do when I'm saving a data frame sometimes is just to say like from date time, import date time. And what did I call the data frame out? I'll save it with like a certain time. So I'll say date time dot now. I'll convert that to a string, strf time. I'll say year, month. You see, now we'll get the day. And maybe if I'm doing this a lot, I'll put like minute. So I'll say my save name is equal to an F string. And maybe it's going to be a CSV. So within the F string, that's the dynamic part. Save name there. And I can say out to CSV save name. And you can make it kind of more dynamic there. And we'll look at our CSVs, and there you go. And if you're running it every minute or every second, you just keep resaving these things, at least you'll always have the updated value there. So there you go. Hopefully you got some value out of this. We covered a bunch of stuff. Really the hardest part when you're doing web scraping is exception handling, tricking the server to actually allow your request, and finding the elements you want to scrape. And usually it just boils down to finding divs, spans, links, h1 tags, having a specific class name. And you don't have to be a wizard with Beautiful Soup. You can get away with find all, get text. Sometimes a little bit of regex comes in handy, but usually it's just keeping your code modular and being able to hand issues as they arise, because they definitely will arise. Websites are not consistent, and hope y'all had fun.